you. I rise today to honor the service and sacrifice of Greensboro police officer Michael Horan. On Monday, December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, Officer Horan was the first officer to respond to a call of a man with a firearm at a Food Line supermarket in Greensboro, North Carolina. As Officer Horan entered the store and confronted the suspect engaged in a struggle that eventually led to Officer Horan being shot and killed. The suspect fled the scene and led law enforcement on a multiple county chase, and the brave men and women from various law enforcement agencies eventually apprehended the suspect on Interstate 40. Officer Horan personified the very best of law enforcement. Greensboro Police Chief John Thompson stated that Officer Horan was a valued and respected member of the Greensboro police family. He worked for the Greensboro Police Department since 2017 and had a distinguished record of service with the U.S. Coast Guard. As a U.S. Coast Guard member, Officer Horan served as a law enforcement officer, tactical fast boat instructor, and search and rescue operator for safety and security of the United States. Even when he was off duty, he exemplified valor. In 2019, Officer Horan received a life-saving award from the Greensboro Police Department for saving a father and son who had been caught in a rip current at a beach at Emerald Isle. For as impressive as Officer Horan was for his exemplary work, it was his job as a family man, loving husband, father, and son. One of his colleagues noted that one of the main things most people would know about Officer Horan was how much he loved his family. He loved his daughter. If you ask anybody in the department to describe him, one friend said, I feel like his daughter would be in every conversation. He loved his family, and he included it in virtually every conversation he had with his colleagues. He upheld the oath to protect and serve his community and his country. He exemplified what it means to be an extraordinary public servant, and he made the ultimate sacrifice. My deepest condolences go out to Officer Horan's family for their tremendous loss. And my condolences go out to the community of Greensboro, which lost one of their finest, most decent public servants. And we will never forget his service. Mr. President, Officer Horan actually passed away a year ago last December. We were not in session at the time, so I thought it was appropriate to recognize the anniversary of his death. But I want to talk a little bit more, Mr. President. Since 2015, when I first took office as a U.S. Senator in my home state of North Carolina, we have tragically lost far too many law enforcement officers. In fact, we've lost 85 in the time that I've been a U.S. Senator since 2015. This includes deaths related to law enforcement assaults, gunfire, vehicular pursuits, and duty-related illnesses. These officers took an oath to protect and serve our communities. These heroes made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their life to protect their communities. I will not get into all the details about each officer, Madam President, but Mr. President, what I would ask is unanimous consent to provide a list of the fallen officers since I've been a member of the U.S. Senate to be included in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we start the 119th Congress, my colleague from North Carolina, who is currently presiding, I think we both agree that we want to emphasize that Congress has a role in supporting and protecting our law enforcement officers across this country. According to the National Fraternity Order of Police, in 2024, 342 officers were shot in the line of duty. Of those officers, 50 officers were tragically killed by criminals. Unfortunately, over the past few years, we've We've seen shameful behavior from certain, and I hope and I pray that it's a minority of our society. But we have people out there raising money for fundraising runs called the 13.12 mile run. 1312 translates into ACAB. And on their website, they proudly proclaim that ACAB stands for All Cops Are Bastards. Let that sink in. It's appalling to hear this kind of rhetoric, and it has to stop. These dangerous statements not only create distrust and disdain for our brave men and women in blue, the vast majority of which are good, hardworking people that we all know in our communities, but it's made their job to protect and serve more difficult and more deadly. We've got to do better. We've got to protect law enforcement, and that's why I plan to reintroduce multiple pieces of legislation in the coming weeks. First among them is going to be the Protect and Serve Act. It makes a federal crime for anyone who knowingly causes or attempts to cause bodily harm or injury to a law enforcement officer. It's amazing it's not a crime already. I hope to do so with strong bipartisan support when I file the bill and get it passed in this Congress. We also must act to punish criminals who intentionally murder law enforcement. That's why I'll also be introducing the Justice for Fallen Law Enforcement Act. This legislation would create a criminal penalty for the murder of a local, state, or federal law enforcement officer, punishable with a death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. I urge all Americans listening to contact their senators and representatives, tell them that you want to protect law enforcement officers, and support enhancing penalties for those who would do them harm. The men and women in blue are heroes. They deserve our support. We need everyone in our communities to stand up to these people who would not want them in the community, who would not want them to respond to a 911 call. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine our communities if the logical conclusion of these people who hate law enforcement officers so much that they proudly profess that all cops are bastards publicly to raise money? We need to increase awareness, and we need to make absolutely certain that every man and woman in blue knows we have their back. Thank you, Mr. President.